Good morning, good afternoon. Welcome to the DCSA webinar. We're very glad that you can join us today. I'll just tell you a little bit about DCSA, Digital Container Shipping Association, in case you're not familiar with us. We are a nonprofit group founded by major ocean carriers. And our mission is to digitize and standardize the container shipping industry. We're technology neutral, and we invite everyone to collaborate with us. So all our DCSA standards are open source, including the implementation guide we talk about today, and they're published on our website. We welcome you to freely use them and also give us feedback. So today, there are 4 of us from DCSA on the webinar. We're joining from different countries, all from home because of the coronavirus situation. So I'm dialing in from the Netherlands. I will introduce Henning in a second. He's dialing from Germany. And we also have Rachel as well as Christian from Denmark. Okay. And with that, let me introduce you to Henning.
Thank you, Ellen. Yeah, also from my side, welcome everybody to our second webinar or second series of webinars now on our recently published cybersecurity guide. Thank you a lot for joining us today. I hope you are all well during these crazy times. I mean, that's maybe the good thing that we can find in organizing it as a webinar, that these kind of interactions are still allowed to continue. So we are very happy, as Ellen mentioned, everybody of us, DCSA, dialing in from home today. But we are happy that we can still continue these kind of actions and activities and have you joining us today. So COVID is forcing us to choose different ways of working, and we are also looking into how we can offer and extend these activities for you as well going forward. Next slide, please, Ellen. Let me just show you what's on our agenda. So we want to keep it short and sweet for today. We plan to have the whole session in a duration of 45 minutes. And after the short welcome, we have 2 sessions planned. One presented to you from Rachel, who's our Director of Operations and Center of Cybersecurity Excellence, talking about her view on the cyber threat landscape and how to secure a vessel. And the second part then thereafter is delivered to you by Christian Güntelberg, who was the project manager of the project that finally resulted in our implementation guide. At the end, we have reserved 10 to 15 minutes for Q&As, and we are happy to answer your questions that you can key in during the webinar into the questions panel in that third part. And now I'm happy to hand over to Rachel for her presentation, please.
Thank you, Henning. Hello, my name is Rachel Bardo. I'm the Director of DCSA Cybersecurity Center of Excellence and Operations. Today, I'm going to talk to you about the importance of cybersecurity in the maritime sphere. Next slide, please. Michael Mullen, the US Navy Admiral Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, said that we are vulnerable in the military and in our governments, but I think we're most vulnerable to cyber attacks commercially. This challenge is going to significantly increase. It's not going to go away. As the shipping industry goes through a digital revolution, bringing with it many opportunities, both for the industry and for its customers, the cyber threat in turn has increased, and complex technology enables attackers to exploit system vulnerabilities. Container shipping currently supports 90% of global trade. If you stop and look at what you're wearing, what you're sitting on, and the computer from which you dialed into this webinar, the chances are that at some point it was traveling around the world in a container. And as we have learned in recent times, There are some things that we all need. Next slide, please. As the attendance on this call is from a mix of backgrounds and industries, it may help for those of you from the IT background to understand that when you think about maritime risk, you can think of it like a network. Ships move along sea lines of communication, much as data packets move along a network. There are strategic choke points, like the Panama Canal or the Strait of Hormuz, that would be the locations where your IT security team would place boundary controls, such as firewalls and intrusion detection systems. When you assess the risk to maritime trade, it is important to understand the motivations and capabilities of potential threat actors. Moreover, when you consider the operating environment of a seaborne vessel, you have to consider not just the security of systems and data, but more importantly, the paramount safety of the crew on board. So, what threat actor groups exist that are specific to the shipping industry? Verizon were called in by a global shipping company to investigate a group of pirates who appeared to have specific knowledge of the contents of containers. They would board a vessel, and by its unique number, they would locate the exact container they were looking for. They then stole the contents of that container, and only that container, before leaving the vessel. Verizon found that the hackers had uploaded a malicious web shell to a server on the content management system, which in turn gave them access to all the information they needed. Next slide, please. Another well-known cyber attack on the shipping industry was the cyber attack on the port of Antwerp. Like most cyber attacks, it started with the threat actors sending phishing emails containing malware to staff. Once the malware had taken hold, the smugglers were able to identify and intercept the containers holding the smuggled goods. When the containers had been collected by the smugglers, they were wiped from the system. So when the real drivers arrived to collect the containers, they'd vanished. It was ultimately the disappearance of these large metal boxes that alerted the port authorities to the fact that something was not right. Next slide, please. We've also seen a surge in GPS spoofing. Initially in the Black Sea, vessels were finding themselves showing as being on land rather than at sea. Whilst this may seem relatively harmless, spoofing vessel locations at a choke point could lead to ships crashing, blocking a main route, and even a potential loss of life. Similar spoofing activities are happening off the Somali coast and near the Strait of Hormuz, leading to some captains turning off their navigation systems as they pass through these waters. And in recent days, we've seen threat actors trying to take advantage of the corona situation, and a new Trojan is going round as an attachment to emails entitled Coronavirus Affected Crew and Vessel .xlsm. So the threat is ever changing. Next slide, please. The cybersecurity industry is underpinned by a number of clearly defined standards, detailing technical measures, procedural controls, and forms of assessment. Some cover the organization, the environment, and architecture, such as ISO 27001 or NIST 800-53, while others underpin the precise requirements for technologies, such as FIPS 140-2, which is a US government computer security standard used to approve cryptographic modules. Where DCSA will seek to support the maritime world is by applying our knowledge of the specific operating environment from ports and terminals to vessels ashore and at sea. We will ensure that our standards are aligned with the common language of cybersecurity and existing best practices to assist with community adoption and implementation. How do we determine where to focus our efforts? We will apply a number of criteria to ensure that we address the most important challenges to the industry so that we can assist with the delivery of tangible business results. These criteria, as you can see, include the following. Does it apply to more than one carrier organisation? Will it be more efficient to address the challenge as a unified group rather than as individual business? Will it enhance industry interoperability? Will it aid supply chain security? And finally, will it deliver value to our end customers? Our objective is to identify the key areas of focus for the industry and to produce guidance that can be incorporated into the standard operating procedures of maritime organisations. Today, I will talk mainly about cybersecurity on board vessels, an important place to start since the IMO 2021 mandate is fast approaching. Next slide, please. I'm going to spend the next few slides discussing the concept of containment on board vessels. Containment is, by definition, a function that assists to limit and prevent further damage from happening, along with ensuring that there is no destruction of forensic evidence that may be needed for legal actions against the attackers later. Over the next 3 slides, I will look at the steps that should be taken to prevent a cyber attack, starting with preparation, moving into what should be done to quarantine infected systems, and finally, why a forensics investigation is important for your business. Next slide, please. The most important facet of being able to control an attack is being prepared. I have seen many incidents that would either not have happened or had a far smaller impact if only some housekeeping had been done. Make sure your patching and your anti-malware and antivirus signatures are up to date. Ensure that your crew is fully up to date with cybersecurity training. We know that crews rotate regularly between vessels, and this in itself adds an additional risk to familiarity with security procedures. Your chances of success rely heavily upon the foundation of a comprehensive configuration management database, also known as a CMDB. Not only should this detail what you have and where it is, but also its criticality level. Its criticality level enables you to prioritize your levels of protection and to understand which systems may be vulnerable. Next slide, please. As I've previously mentioned, a key personnel risk to cybersecurity on board vessels is the speed with which the crews rotate. In the event of an incident, any kind of incident, it is important that everyone knows what their role is. As part of their safety management system, a vessel will already have an overarching incident management plan. For the cybersecurity incident management plan to be most effective, it should dovetail into this overarching approach to incident response. And there is potential value to be held in standardizing the cybersecurity incident response across vessels. Infected systems should be removed from the network and placed into quarantine to prevent the rapid spread of malware, or to stop the threat actors attempting to move laterally between systems. Obviously, ships have constraints in terms of available storage. However, Where possible, spares should be made available to ensure that operations can continue. If you think back to the configuration management database I mentioned earlier, where we discussed applying a criticality level to systems, you can use this information to prioritize which spares you should hold on board as a minimum. You must review the network ports which are open on your boundary devices, such as firewalls or host intrusion or detection systems. The ingress and egress points, essentially the entrance and exit points to your network, must be secured. You may even seek to close down network ports that are being used for specific operational tasks if they are believed to present an entry point for your attacker to abuse. Even if you believe that your ports are locked down safely, I cannot stress how important it is that you check the current configuration. I have seen threat actor groups compromise firewalls and open the rules to allow all traffic to flow from anywhere. Next slide, please. When talking about forensics, the chain of custody refers to the chronological documentation or paper trail that records the sequence of custody, control, transfer, analysis, and disposition of physical or electronic evidence. When talking about digital forensics, digital evidence is different from physical evidence. A carefully protected image of a hard drive is as valid as the original hard drive in the eyes of a court. The first image of a hard drive that a forensic team takes is known as the best evidence, as it is closest to the original source. Best evidence must be attached to a chain of custody form and stored under lock and key. This evidence is invaluable as it enables an organisation to represent themselves in court, thereby protecting not only their bottom line, but also their brand reputation. Next slide, please. As you can see here, the IMO Resolution MSC 428/98 states that cyber risks are to be appropriately addressed in safety management systems, no later than the first annual verification of the company's document of compliance after the 1st of January 2021. Non-compliance with this resolution could lead to vessel detainment in ports. The IMO resolution applies to all commercial ships over 500 gross tonnage. Therefore, this resolution applies as much to container vessels as it does to tankers and cruise ships. DCSA has produced a guideline to assist vessel owners with assessing risk and implementing security controls. Moreover, if you are an organisation that charters vessels, you can share this document with the charter vessel owners as guidance to assist with their efforts to ensure cybersecurity on board vessels. To talk about this further, I would like to hand you over to Christian Gintelberg.
Thank you very much, Rachel. And since I've been part of creating the implementation guide, I will take you through the scope, some of the methodology that we have used, and dive into two specific use cases. Unfortunately, we will not have time to go through the entire guide, as I'm sure you are aware, it's 100+ pages, but we'll take two specific examples during today's webinar. Next slide, please. So the scope of the DCSA cybersecurity implementation guide is vessel IT, or basically information technology and operational technology on board ships. And cybersecurity on ships is about safety management with the core objective of protecting the crew, the general environment, and assets in that order of priority. So when we talk about information technology, we talk about any IT on board ships, computers, electronic manuals, networks, applications, as well as crew mobile devices. And operational technology is anything related to operating the ship. It could be engine control, it could be the electronic chart displays, it could be onboard measurement and control systems, power management, etc. What we will not address, or what we have not addressed, is shore-based information assets. So IT not on board a vessel. Next slide, please. Our starting point has been the BIMCO cybersecurity guidelines that were published in December 2018. And we have mapped those to the NIST framework. NIST is National Institute of Standards and Technology, a US organization that has published a very structured approach how to approach cybersecurity implementation and protection of IT assets. So what we have done is we have mapped the BIMCO guidelines into logical security themes and again matched those against the security controls published by NIST. The benefit of that is that NIST includes a maturity model where carriers or ship operators can choose their level of maturity when implementing security controls. And that allows new starters, people who have not looked at this before, to start at the basic level, but it also enables carriers who are more mature to continuously improve on what the security controls are that they have implemented. So a carrier can decide its desired maturity level using the NIST framework. So now I'd like to go through a couple of use cases. So next slide, please. The first use case is how to actually conduct a risk assessment using a practical example. All ships, at least most ships, have communication systems on board, and that will of course have been identified during your asset identification and prioritization. Communication systems are critical assets that are exposed to threats. Those threats could be phishing emails or USB devices, any external threat that can impact a communication system. And for that, you now have to assess what is the initial risk to a communication system. In this example, you take the likelihood of an attack or an incident and combine that with the impact of an attack, and the end result could be medium risk. You then go through your risk assessment and you decide how are we going to address these risks. We can have various risk treatment options. You either accept the risk, you avoid the risk, you treat the risk, or you transfer the risk. A risk transfer could be to seek insurance against a threat, or escalate to a higher management level who may decide to accept or not accept a risk. At the end of the risk assessment, you will have implemented some security controls to reduce the risk, likely. For instance, network separation, firewalls and whitelisting of email addresses, USB access control and log feedback, and of course, as Rachel already mentioned earlier, training of crew to understand what are the standards. And hopefully, or you should at the end of such a risk assessment, end up with a low risk. Thing is, this is not the end result, because in 3 to 6 months' times, things may have changed. So you need to go through this on a continuous basis with regular intervals to make sure that your risk assessment is up to date and valid. We have published some templates for you to use for that purpose as part of the implementation guide, and they're freely available on our website. Next slide, please. So here we have an example of how do you then plan response to a cybersecurity incident. in the case of an incident, you will probably have, depending on the size of the organization, the size of the ship, and complexity of the operations, you may have a IT specialist on board the ship. In the case, let's take an example, a malfunctioning laptop. An onboard officer may likely be able to establish, is this simply because an update to the operating system is required, or is this a potential cybersecurity incident? If it is a cybersecurity incident, he will likely escalate it to level 2 analysis, who will conduct further analysis of the asset, which then will lead to an incident response and a containment of the incident or cybersecurity incident, potential or hopefully eradication, and then recovery. This looks very much like a standard IT incident management system, which is by nature or which is by design, because cybersecurity will be part of IT management normally in an organization, and as such it will probably become part of the standard IT incident management system. So on that note, I'd like to hand over to Henning Sleiberg.
Yeah, Christian, many thanks for that insight. Yeah, I've been just trying to answer a couple of questions around the webinar that came up in between. But on this slide, I would just like to highlight once again that even though DCSA may look like a closed shop, as we only allow liner shipping container carriers as our members, and as Ellen pointed out, we have 9 of the top 10 carriers as our members right now. However, we value your feedback and what we are working on and agreeing as a standard or ease of implementation, like this example about the cybersecurity implementation guide. We want to share for the sake of the industry. And we share that open source under the Apache license. So there was one question in the chat that on some of our slides we still have a copyright on it. So we probably need to get that straight, because Apache license means you are free to use it even for commercial offers. So you're free to copy, you're free to use it. You just need to reference back to us. And it comes without liability, which is okay for a standard for a piece of software that could be an issue for you. However, as we believe that with whatever we publish, we will not have all the knowledge within our members and the working groups we have, we really love to get your feedback. And there are multiple ways for you to get engaged with us. The easiest thing is probably to go to our website, where you can download or watch online all our publications. And we are using a small snip-in called UserSnap that allows you to give feedback. It is really easy to use. So if you are on the View Online page of one of our publications, there's a red box saying feedback. You just click on it. It creates a screenshot. You can make a drawing on it. You leave your email address and a comment, and then we know exactly where that comment belongs to in our publication. So that makes it easy for you as well as for us. There's another option that you have as you are now joining and participating in the webinar. We'd like you to fill out a survey afterwards, and that should give us some feedback on how you like the webinar, but also where you would see DCSA getting engaged, for example, in the cybersecurity space going forward. And we are also planning to set up a reference user group. Here we are mainly interested in collaboration with shipping lines customers. Anyhow, if you have a good idea for collaboration or where you would like to collaborate with us, just leave us your thoughts in the survey and we will get back to you. And with that, back to Ellen, please.
Okay, thank you, Henning. I'm looking at the questions. We have a couple. Let me start first with specific to the cybersecurity implementation guide of this project. I think this question is probably for Christian. The question is, what was the collaboration process like? when you defined the implementation guide, and who did you work with?
Right. So the way we work in DCSA is that we work through participants from the carriers. They appoint subject matter experts who then collaborate among themselves to participate, contribute, and provide insights on what is most relevant to focus on and what will bring the most value to the participants. So in that forum, since this is cybersecurity is a non-competitive or non-differentiating nature anyway for the carriers, so it was a very open and positive, I would say, contributory atmosphere, and I hope that also comes through in the actual guide, that it's very, very practical, and there's some very shipping specific steps and terms that will look familiar to the carriers when they now start the implementation process. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Here's one more question. This one may be for Henning. What is on the DCSA roadmap?
Yeah, let me start with that in terms of cybersecurity. So DCSA is looking into a couple of other topics as well. So we started with a process and an interface model for track and trace. But cybersecurity, especially with this IMO regulation coming up, was always top of our list. So we are very happy that we could complete this cyber implementation guide. Over the next 2 quarters, the team will focus on cyber security excellence as an horizontal function. So we have a work stream looking into IoT devices, smart container tracking devices. This is something that needs to be handled with a security view as of the beginning. So in the end, the standards for exchange of data or connectivity that the team is currently working on should reflect proper cybersecurity rules as from the beginning. So this is something where the team will focus on. And at the same time, I think Rachel tried to point that out. We are really trying to see where DCSA in our role and with still a small team that we are can add most value. And that's probably around the niche of what is specific in terms of maritime cybersecurity. Not so much about how do you secure your, let's say, exchange server on the land side, because this is really where other organizations have a lot more knowledge and capabilities than we actually have.
Okay. Thank you. So we'll give it another minute. If anybody has any questions or comments, here's your chance. Otherwise, we save you a few minutes from the scheduled time.
Maybe I can use that time while somebody's still making up their mind to key something in to talk about the other initiatives that we have. So in our data and interface standards project, we are now looking into schedule, how we can harmonize ETAs and publication of schedules. We also plan to enter the field of electronic bill of ladings, where we can learn a lot from the airline industry. In shipping, EBL currently only has a market share of 2%, so that's far from where we would like to see it. I mentioned the IoT thing already, and there's another project which we are about to kick off, which is about just-in-time arrival planning of vessels in ports. There are a lot of or two worthwhile worth to mention working groups that have worked on that, and we are trying to pick up their work and try to help scaling this up. And it's in the end about avoidance of unnecessary waiting time and thus reduction of emissions caused by shipping.
Okay. We have one question that just came in. Have we considered the ISPS code risk assessment into our methodology?
For me, and
Would this
that's
one be for Christian?
Yes, we definitely consider that. But I'm sure if you read through the implementation guide, specifically under risk assessment, it's clearly stated as well. But thanks for that question.
Okay, and we have a question about, what we're doing competing with any other similar platform, or any time in the future with any service providers, or restricted in use?
Yeah, let me try to answer that, Ellen. So that's, I mean, we had a discussion, and we closely collaborated with BIMCO, and we were also in touch with IMO when we were working on this implementation guide. So we shared it with them and reached out for feedback. We got feedback back from them, and we don't see that as a competition. So BIMCO and us, we are both non-for-profit. So we really don't have plans to capitalize this in a commercial way going forward. We really rather see it as a contribution towards a safer shipping environment, and we believe it goes beyond the scope of the vessels that are operated by our members, and it adds value without additional cost for our members. So this is why we took the decision to publish it under our open source license. So for our members, first of all, the benefit is going to be for their own fleet and their chartered fleet. However, we believe a lot of these things are useful also for bulk tankers, cruise ships, or any other type of ships that you are looking into securing from a cybersecurity perspective. And yeah, this is why we have put it out, because we don't see this as a competitive element. And maybe to iterate that once more on the license type, because there was one of the questions, we're going to make that more clear in the publication. We publish under the Apache license. This is an open source, pretty common open source license type, and it means you can use the material for your internal use, but also for external use. Even if you make it part, let's assume you are a consultancy company providing services in the cyberspace, you can use it for your work as well. And we rather see that as an ease of these things as a competition.
And on that note, on behalf of DCSA and our member carriers, we really thank you for spending the time with us today, and we hope to see you on our next webinar.